On March the 31st, 2025, the Brisbane District Court reached a verdict in the legal battle where American video game personality Billy Mitchell sued Australian YouTuber Karl Jobst for defamation. The court sided with Mitchell, requiring Jobst to pay 350,000 Australian dollars in damages, plus interest of $34,668.50. bringing the total to be about 385,000 Australian dollars, which is roughly 250,000 US dollars. So why did Karl Jobst lose this case, and does he have the chance to appeal the judge's decision? Well, that's what I hope to explain in this video, so let's get on with it. The defamation case centered on a video Jobst posted in May of 2021 titled, "The Biggest Conman in Video Game History Strikes Again." In this video, Jobst discussed Mitchell's previous lawsuit against YouTuber Benjamin Smith, known as Apollo Legend, who tragically committed suicide in December of 2020. Jobst argued that Mitchell's legal action against Smith resulted in a settlement that left Smith heavily in debt, forcing him to work more despite health problems, implying this contributed to Smith's death. Mitchell claimed this was defamatory, arguing it falsely suggested he drove Smith to take his own life. Judge Ken Barlow concluded that Jobst's claims were not substantially true. The judge found that Jobst's assertion about a large sum of money Smith paid to Mitchell was unsupported and based on a false assumption. The judge stated that Jobst acted irresponsibly by making these claims without enough proof and criticized Jobst for having malice and a spiteful attitude towards Mitchell. The judge also noted that Jobst had re-uploaded the video multiple times and hadn't directly apologized, which worsened the situation. Crucially, the court did not make a judgment on whether Mitchell actually cheated in achieving his Donkey Kong World Record scores, a central point Jobst has consistently raised in his content. Barlow specifically stated that his role was not to decide if Mitchell cheated, as Jobst did not defend himself by trying to prove that accusation true in this particular case. Instead, the defamation focused on the Apollo Legend narrative, where Jobst's lack of evidence and careless way of presenting the information ultimately harmed his defense. Under Australia's Defamation Act 2005, a defendant like Jobst could have won by proving the substantial truth of his statements, Section 25, or by arguing contextual truth, Section 26, where other true statements overshadowed the defamatory one. However, Jobst's defense failed because he couldn't back up his claims about the financial details and cause of Smith's settlement and suicide. Additionally, Judge Barlow found Mitchell's testimony to be believable, even though Jobst tried to question Mitchell's reputation and credibility by bringing up past lawsuits and how the community viewed him. The financial consequences are immediate and serious. Jobst has to pay Mitchell over 385,000 Australian dollars, and as is typical in the Australian legal system, the losing party might also have to pay the winner's legal expenses, which will be decided later. Jobst had previously mentioned that defending himself against Mitchell's various lawsuits had already cost him around 180,000 Australian dollars, with another estimated $100,000 expected. This ruling could push his total legal costs well over 500,000 Australian dollars. Now, this is obviously a huge financial burden, especially for an independent content creator with over 1.1 million subscribers. Beyond the financial aspect, the verdict hurts Jobst's reputation as a gaming journalist and commentator. Known for uncovering cheating and dishonesty in the speedrunning and retro gaming communities, Jobst has presented himself as someone who fights for the truth. This loss could damage his credibility, especially if critics portray it as evidence of his own carelessness or bias, which is ironically traits he often accuses his subjects of having. Now, Jobst has the option to appeal the decision, although it won't be easy or guaranteed to succeed. In Queensland, an appeal from the district court would usually go to the Queensland Court of Appeal. Jobst would need to submit a notice of appeal within 28 days of the judgment by April 28, 2025, unless he gets an extension. Appeals in defamation cases typically focus on legal errors, such as incorrect interpretations of evidence, wrong application of the law, or unfair procedures, rather than simply re-arguing the facts. Potential grounds for Jobst to appeal could include challenging the judge's finding of malice or the assessment of Mitchell's credibility, especially considering Mitchell's history of making inconsistent statements in other legal proceedings, like his lawsuit against Twin Galaxies. He might also argue that the damage awarded were excessive compared to the harm proven, particularly since Mitchell's reputation was already damaged by previous cheating allegations, a point Jobst's defense emphasized but the judge largely ignored. However, overturning a defamation verdict requires showing a clear error, and Australian courts tend to respect the original judge's decisions unless there's strong evidence to suggest otherwise. Appealing would be very expensive. The legal fees for an appeal could easily be between $50,000 to $100,000 Australian dollars, and if Jobst loses again, he would likely have to pay Mitchell's additional legal costs. Given his current financial difficulties, Jobst would need to carefully consider his chances of winning against the risk of further debt. Now on X, Jobst has acknowledged the loss, and he said he would consider more options, indicating he is at least thinking about an appeal. Which of course he has 28 days to figure all that stuff out. Now I of course have a lot of mixed feelings about this. On one hand, Jobst's loss feels more like a technicality than a true moral defeat. The judge's focus on the Apollo Legends situation rather than the cheating claims avoids the core of what Jobst has been fighting against with Mitchell. There's a lot of evidence, including photos and technical analysis from Jobst and others, suggesting Mitchell's Donkey Kong scores were achieved using modified hardware, a finding that led Twin Galaxies to remove his records in 2018. Yet, the court didn't address this, and Jobst's overreach regarding the Apollo narrative gave Mitchell a win he might not have deserved on the bigger issue of cheating. I feel for Jobst. He's spent years battling a figure who seems to use lawsuits as a weapon against Twin Galaxies, Apollo Legend, David Race, and Jobst himself, often settling or dropping cases when faced with a strong challenge. Mitchell's credibility should be questionable. His boastful public image and documented inconsistencies, like claiming Twin Galaxies' defamation was far worse than Jobst's, don't exactly inspire confidence. It's surprising and frankly questionable that the judge found him credible in this case, considering the overall picture. However, Jobst isn't entirely innocent. His video's portrayal of Apollo Legends' suicide was based on speculation and was emotionally charged, crossing the line from reporting to accusation without solid proof. It was a basic error for someone who has built his career on detailed evidence gathering. His strong dislike for Mitchell seemed to cloud his judgment, and in defamation law, intent and recklessness are just as important as the truth. If he had stuck to the cheating allegations, where his evidence is stronger, he might have avoided this situation. The implications of this ruling worry me. It could encourage Mitchell to sue others, potentially stifling criticism within the gaming community. Australia's defamation laws, while intended to be fair, can disproportionately impact defendants, especially when facing well-funded plaintiffs. This might discourage creators from tackling controversial figures, which would be a loss for accountability in niche areas like speedrunning. If Jobst decides to appeal, I'd hope he can refine his case and focus on the weaknesses in Mitchell's credibility. But he'd probably be wise to aggressively seek crowdfunding or negotiate a settlement, as much as it might pain him, to avoid potential bankruptcy. For now, this feels like a hollow victory for Mitchell. He has the money and the legal win, but his reputation as a gaming icon is still tarnished. Jobst, on the other hand, faces a tough road ahead, but could still be seen as a martyr for his cause if he plays his next moves carefully. But what do you all think? Do you think that Karl might have a chance to turn this thing around? Do you believe that Billy Mitchell is still a cheater? Let me know in the comments section below, and also be sure to subscribe to this channel for more content. Anyways, this has been PC signing out, and I'll see you all in the next video.